Hello, I'm Self-Critical Chloe, and for today's episode, I'm going to do something a little different than what I usually do. I'm going to be designing an asset for a roleplay game that I'm going to be making, and this one is actually going to be a kind of a Sinister Dagger. So the primary reason I'm doing this is the villain, or at least one of the villains in the particular portion that the party will be coming up against, is a murderer, and he has a very sinister weapon. And I couldn't find any assets to actually properly identify what was going on with this, so I decided to make one myself. And this is kind of what I came up with. So essentially, what's going to happen is this is going to be really um, more of a crude iron kind of look. That's what I'm going for. I'm not really going to go like super detailed with it either. Um, the goal is to just have a really quick um, depiction of what I'm going for, something that's good enough to get the job done, and give a kind of visual depiction what uh, of what the party has found when they find this particular item. So here I am, just working out a rough outline. I've actually sped this up like 600%. This took me like an hour to do in total. So it wasn't very difficult to do at all. Now, as far as any DMs that may possibly come across this, so DMs or GMs, depending on whichever term you use, you can use this exact same process when it comes to designing weapons as well. Like, all I did was I took a look at a basic dagger and I was like, you know what? I want something that's more of a straight razor, and I modified the weapon a tad bit and just made it a simple weapon and basically kept it off the dagger stats. Now, this particular dagger is going to be called the Life Drinker. I think I might have mentioned it. But essentially, the whole purpose of this is the ability that it was supposed to have was when it strikes somebody, it inflicts a persistent bleed. And then on top of that, it had a activation ability that once per day for 1 minute, it would heal the user for the amount of persistent bleed damage that they've dealt during that minute. So, a really synergistic ability here, but super, super, super simple to do. And something that I don't feel is overly game breaking, unless, I mean, actually, not even then, but nothing that's overly game breaking, because even if they decide to keep the weapon, continue to enchant it, make it better, like, even then, the weapon isn't going to be overly broken because the healing ability is directly tied to the amount of persistent bleed damage that can be dealt. Really apologize if you can hear everyone screaming in the background. But here, again, like, my goal was to get a really rough iron look, so I took some dark gray, peppered it in, chose a little bit of a kind of like a brownish color, peppered it in with a few more like light grays and brownish colors, and I was thinking about putting in some red, and when I did that, it just did not look good, so I peppered in just like a little bit of a lighter brown and hoping to get that like iron effect in there, and I think I captured it relatively good. Again, I'm not going for a full 3D effect on this. If I was, I would add a couple of embellishments around the handle to make it look a little bit deeper than what it ends up looking at the end. But right here, you'll get the general gist if you are a GM on the process I use for designing a weapon. Super simple. It doesn't have to be super complex at all. You can use GIMP with this. You can use Photoshop or whatever it is your editing tool is. I mean, I'm not doing anything like that really can't be done in any other program. So right here, I was going to do like rope, and I I apparently cannot speak today. I instead decided to scrap that idea, and since it was supposed to be a Sinister dagger, I decided to go with more of flavor text that wrapping was supposed to be tanned flesh. So a little bit more darker and sinister and everything like that. I mean, the weapon is something that a murderer was using after all. Now, for this particular part, all I did was go through with a dodge tool and literally make all those outlines that I had made before. And it gets pretty simple. It's not really super extravagant. It's a basic idea of how to make this work. And just do that through the entirety of the design. If I ever felt like I needed to change part of the design up, then I did. And I actually do change up parts of it a little bit in this area right here. Then just kind of go through and touch any of the spots that I really want to touch up on and make sure that they stand out a little bit more, etc. After that, I came back through with a dodge tool, or not the dodge tool. I came back through with a burn tool to add the shading and shadows for it. And here I'm doing that right now, and this starts to give those effects like a little bit more of a 3D look. And for this, all you really do is you pick, okay, well, this is the low side, and that's it. Super simple. And already you can see that this is starting to take on more of a three-dimensional look. And despite the fact that we're going to be looking at it from this one angle, we're not going to be looking at it from a different angle at all. For here, I'm just trying to shade the blade a little bit and then add like a point of highlight on it just so that looks relatively nice. And here I'm adding a few more highlights towards the back so I can add some shadows. And at this point I decided that I needed to have that same crude design on the hilt, so I just went and added a couple of spots that I thought made it look relatively nice. And again, following the same technique to where essentially just shaded with what I would say is the low parts of that. So super simple to do. Following the same concept, just essentially did the same thing to the rest of the hilt and come back with the dodge tool to add the highlights. And the next portion is just working on the razor edge to make sure that stands out just a tiny bit more. And again, nothing super extravagant or fancy. Going back through those little crevices that we previously made and adding a couple of highlight spots to give it more of a three-dimensional feel, because again, I wasn't really planning to do a whole lot with this. I could have gone super detailed with this, but I wanted to make it as simple as possible. And I thought about adding a drop shadow, and when I did that, it essentially just took the 3D effect of it and was like, yeah, no, I don't want it to look like that. So I instead went back around and I was like, well, is this supposed to be Sinister? Let's go mess around with the glow effects a little bit more. And this is going to be it right here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please comment, like, and subscribe.